Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Nate here. This is the Learn to Program channel. We've been working now on building a personal finance management app. Here it is. But today's lesson is all about building Docker containers for the API, which we've chosen to build with PHP and the Symfony framework. Symfony is my favorite framework to build APIs in. Unfortunately, PHP is kind of a pain in the butt to deploy. So in this lesson, we're going to go over how to build Docker containers which make it easy to deploy your PHP applications after they've been built. Now, originally I tried to shoot this live, but it was kind of it was a real struggle, and I don't want to waste your guys' time going over how we did that. Instead, it's best to probably just go over what we did so that you guys can get all the benefit of learning how to build these containers without any of the pain of watching me pull my hair out and scream at the wall. So let's dive in. If you guys want to take a look at any of the source code, you can go over to my GitHub page. It's github.com/nader1067. That has the repositories for the front end and the back end My Money Manager apps. So enjoy those. Feel free to use those and share those with anybody you like. Sharing is caring. Enjoy that. Sponsored today by Bulletproof Coffee. Wouldn't be able to program without this stuff. Look into it if you don't know about it. It's basically butter and oil and coffee, and it makes you feel like a genius for a few hours at least. So let's get into it. So in order to deploy PHP, we're going to need 2 Docker containers, and I'll show you what they look like deployed just so you can visualize what we use them for. So Amazon ECS is a container management system. We can go on and see that we've got the service, a web service called My Money Manager API, and that runs with a task containing 2 Docker containers, one that runs the PHP container and one that runs Nginx, and that allows us to host these Docker containers in the web, and our API can be accessed by anybody anywhere because it's in the World Wide Web. So let's get into building these containers now, and then we'll even go so far as to push them to a hosted repository store here at Amazon ECS so that we can use them to deploy, which we'll show in another video. So like I said, we're going to need to create 2 Docker containers for our API. If you haven't already installed Docker, now's a good time to do that. Go to docker.com, I believe, and look up the installation instructions, and then come back. Alright, if you're ready to go, the instructions are pretty simple. So we need to build 2 Docker containers. So go ahead and start by setting up this directory structure. Add a Docker directory, and inside of it an Nginx directory and a PHP directory. Each get a Docker file. Nginx gets its own Nginx configuration file. We call it symfony3.conf. Let's start by looking at the PHP Docker file. Now, we use the open source PHP 7.0 FPM Docker source image for this container. That has php-fpm already installed on it, and we also need to install MySQL and the PDO MySQL, and the BC Math PHP extensions for Symfony to work well. After that, we copy our entire directory here, so everything, into the Docker container under the path app. We're also going to copy our production parameters file, and our parameters file is the configuration file for Symfony, into its appropriate location here on the Docker containers that we're creating, because we're creating these Docker containers for production deploy. So as part of the build process, we're going to go ahead and copy them into our Docker container so that we don't have to do any additional configuring. We have a production Docker container ready to run and deploy onto Amazon ECS. So the next thing we need to do is change the permissions for our var, our app var directory, because this is the directory that Symfony uses to write to. So they need to be able to write to the cache and the log and the sessions directories here specifically. And without changing the owner to www-data, which is the user running php-fpm on the Docker container, we would be unable to write to those logs, and Symfony wouldn't work. So this is a very important step here. And then we set the working directory to apps so that our Docker container knows that should be the entry point. So that's it for php-fpm. php-fpm is easy. Now, to build php-fpm, I've included in the repository this build.sh file, and it's got instructions on everything you need to do to build these two Docker containers. So it's really simple. So what we've done is I've gone and put the production parameters file into an S3 bucket right here. So you can see that the production parameters right here in this My Money Manager config bucket. You'll probably want to do the same thing, because you don't need your production configuration stored locally with your repositories. You want them stored somewhere secure in the cloud so that you can pull them down and bundle them together with your build. So we pull that file down and we put it just locally in this file parameters production.yaml. Then to build the php-fpm Docker container, we run one command, and it is docker build. We're running this from the root directory of the project. So let's actually open up a terminal. We're running this from the root directory of the project, so we need to specify where the Docker file is, and that is docker php Docker file. And then we're going to specify a tag for our Docker file. And that tag for the Docker file is going to be, this is any name we want to name it. I recommend, if you're following along with the personal finance series, I recommend just naming it this so that things don't get confused. But this is the tag, and this is the version of that tag. We just call it latest for now. Maybe eventually we'll add versioning to this, but right now latest is fine for our purposes. And then dot is the directory that we want to run this from. This is the context that it's running from. So dot slash docker php Docker file is where it's going to find the Docker file. So let's go ahead and run this, and this is going to build our Docker container, which we'll later deploy to Amazon ECS, assuming that this file is in here, the parameters production file, which it's not, so that's not going to work. Let's go ahead first and copy down our production parameters. So if you're not doing production configuration, you're going to want to remove from your PHP Docker file this bit right here. It's kind of important to have this in your directory if you're going to do this. I've added this file to the gitignore so that if I copy it down and forget to remove it, that it doesn't get committed to source control. So if you look at gitignore, it's got parameters production right here so that that sensitive file doesn't get shared by accident. So we'll go back to build. So now we've copied our file down. I don't recommend running this whole file. I recommend picking and choosing the commands you run at first until you've tested everything out. And then eventually you can run the entire thing /build.sh when you're ready. So now let's go ahead and build that file. Now that our production configuration is here, see. We can see step by step what's going on. It's starting with this source container. It's installing the extensions. It copies all the files over onto the container. It copies our production parameters into the parameters right where the normal parameters sit, and then it changes the permissions of the app var directory. Nice and easy. So our container is built now. So let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. So we can call docker run, and we can actually use our tag here, run it by tag. And just like that, it's running. It says php-fpm is running, ready to handle connections. And that is all good to go. So let's go take a look on there real quick just to see that our files are there. This is how you would go and debug your Docker container. So first thing we would do is run docker ps to list the Docker processes running. We can see that our newly created container here, our container image is running with this container ID. It's been up for 24 seconds. That's definitely the one. Let's copy that container ID, or you could also use the name here. Copy the container ID and run docker exec it for interactive, the container ID, and then bash. And now we're in our running Docker container. So we're in that app directory, which is what we specified as the working directory in our Docker file. And let's just do an lsl and see what we have in here. So our entire Symfony application is in here and ready for us to access, for php-fpm to access. So it looks like our job here is done with the fpm container. Let's move on to the Nginx container. So again, we're going into this Docker directory, now the Nginx directory. And this is another simple Docker file. The real meat and potatoes is copying this Nginx config over, and we'll show you that in a second. So the first thing we do is we start our image from the base image Nginx latest, and next we move the default configuration. We're just moving it to the root directory. Basically, we're just putting it there for debugging purposes. We could just remove it. It's of no use to us. Instead of using that, we're going to use our own custom Nginx config, and we copy that into this directory here on the container. Now that configuration looks like this. What it tells us, and this server name doesn't matter for now. Eventually we're going to call that whatever our website's going to be called, probably. It tells Nginx to look in the app web directory on our container for the source files when a request comes to the Nginx container asking for files to be served. And we tell it that we want all of our files to go through this appdev.php, and eventually it'll be app.php for the production, once we have production running. And it's looking for php-fpm to serve the files, or to load the files at mymoneymanager_php on port 9000. And this host comes from some magic that we do. I'll show you how to do it with Docker links. This part actually took a long time to figure out, and that's the reason why we didn't do this video live. I actually tried to do the videos live, but those got deleted. And I think that's the important bit that you need to know. We also define some error log and access log locations. That's okay. Anyways, that's all for that configuration file. Then, just like the php-fpm file, we copy everything in our root directory of the project into the app directory on the container. And then we just specify, actually I think this is, we don't even need that. I think that's left over, sorry about that. Alright, so our Nginx container is now ready to go. Let's go ahead and build the Nginx container. So what we do here is Well, we have exactly what we need in this build file, in this build build.sh that you'll find on my GitHub in this repository. So you just go ahead and copy that. Same setup as building the PHP container, except we're using the Nginx Docker file and we're tagging it mymoneymanager_Nginx latest. So let's go ahead and run that. Uh-oh, we're in the wrong directory. We need to go up one directory into our API. So go ahead and run that, and that's going to tell us exactly what's going on. It's copying over the initial Nginx config and just storing that there, and instead it's replacing it with our Nginx config that we want it to run. It's copying all the directories, all the folders in there, and now we have our container. This container builds a little faster because we're not messing with file permissions. The PHP container had to change the file permissions of some files for us, and that's why it took a little longer. I'm hoping to find a better way to do that in the future, but right now it doesn't seem like we can. We don't want to run our server as root because it's not secure, and it's pretty tough to deal with file permissions in general with Symfony, unfortunately. Anyways, so we've got this container built. Let's go ahead and run that now. And it's not going to work because it needs to be able to, oh, sorry. We just need to, I think we actually need to get rid of this user vagrant here. Let's build again. But when we run this container, it's not going to work because we need to link it to our php-fpm container, which is running. And I don't actually recommend running Docker on your development environment. I think it's faster and easier just to run your front end and your back end applications on your on your dev machine, which is my MacBook, for instance. But we're doing this. I'm kind of doing this to show you guys the relationship between the two containers, so that you can see what Amazon ECS is doing, the EC2 container service is doing with your two containers when it runs them as a service on ECS. So we're going to run this, and we're going to see an error message telling us that Nginx can't find php-fpm. So what we need to do is tell that container where php-fpm is for it to run. And to do that, we're going to pass it this link flag. So we're going to do docker run link, and our container is called, we need to get the name of our container. So actually I'm going to open up two consoles here. So let's find the name of our container that's running right now. It is called Nginx, and that's just some name that Docker gives it. So we're going to run docker run link Nginx. So this is the name of the container on our MacBook, and then colon, and then we need to call it mymoneymanager.php. So this will be the name of the container on the Nginx container that we're about to run, so that it can find our Nginx, which is our PHP container, from inside of itself. Is there anything else we need to do? We want to specify P so that it mounts Nginx to a port on our, it's going to find just some random high port on our MacBook so that we can go and see the API being served there. And then we just need to give it our container ID that we just built. So see, this one got built here. So we run that, and then it's going to link, it's going to find this container, and actually it's going to use php-fpm to serve files. So let's see, let's look again, docker ps, and now we can see that our Nginx container is running side by side. So it ran successfully, and we can see that it gave this port 32774 is going to forward to our Nginx container on port 80. So let's go ahead and hit this address, 12.07, or sorry, 127.0.0.1, and then our port And there's our Symfony application. Let's take a look at our API health endpoint that we made. And it looks like everything's running just fine. So we have two containers running, a php-fpm container and Nginx container. They're running side by side. Take a look at the next video to see how we deploy that to Amazon ECS. And then we'll actually be able to access our API service from the World Wide Web, and we can actually share it with our friends. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, subscribe below. If you have any suggestions or comments, feedback, please leave those below in the comment field. I really could use your guys' help in making these videos better. I do the videos for you guys. It's fun for me, but I hope that this helps people too. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys have a great day. Go out there, learn how to program, have fun doing it, and I'll see you next time.